Hey everybody. Figured I'd go ahead and get online for a little bit. Go ahead and stream some chess tonight. Um, I gotta commit some time to it, so I'm gonna stream for about an hour. Alexa, set a timer for 1 hour, and we're gonna practice on chess tactics. We're gonna practice some higher level, I would consider them, from as far as what my friends and the players that I play against usually generally do. Um, I'm about 2200 ranked on Lichess right now, as far as both from a playing perspective and also from a tactics perspective. The position that we have on the board actually is a position that came up in a game uh, that I played earlier tonight. I have a bunch of friends who kind of gather up on Wednesday nights and they play chess. Shout out to everybody over at Pop's House. If you're watching this, thank you very much for subbing or whatever. But in this case, this is the position that came up at the very last position on the board for the very last game. I actually got a resignation from my opponent in this position. Um, and I'm up a bishop and two pawns in this position, and I'm not really looking for like the critical win. I'm not looking for the absolute best move, because I'm up so much material. I just want to look at the position and kind of think more tactically. I did look at this with an engine for a split second just before I got online, just because I was setting up the board and I had my stockfish up, and so I know that the best move is not what I played. Um, but it's interesting, nonetheless, and I like to look at a lot of my positions as a tactics puzzle. Um, it's not the way that you should always look at it. You should, a lot of times you get an intuition, like a feeling that there's a tactic in a position, and this is one of those positions that I had. And so the question here on this one is, can I take the pawn on c6? And keep in mind that throughout all of these different calculations that I have to do on this specific position, it will always have to watch out for this checkmate, right here. So taking this pawn is, you got to calculate. You got to make sure that you're not making any mistakes when you do it. Um, and so we rise to this position. So the question is, can I take this pawn? So let's go ahead and put it on the board that it's, we assume that we're going to go ahead and take this. And this is where your calculation kind of has to start. You have to visualize this in your mind with your bishop here. So I'm giving you guys just a half move ahead, just so you can look at the position with me. And it's pretty obvious that the queen can take the bishop, and then the rook can take the bishop, the rook can take the queen, and then the king takes. And I'm in a fine position. I think I'm winning this, so I'm not worried about this trade. I'm okay with this trade, because then at the very end of that line, I also have queen takes, or no, I don't have queen takes. I have pawn takes maybe. I have things in the position that'll help me to win. I just want to kind of simplify it down. So from this position, I calculated, okay, well, where does the queen have to go, or the king have to go? So I calculated this move first. This is probably the easiest one to calculate, because it's setting up this position where the king and the queen are kind of looking at one another. They're in line, especially with this rook. So it's pretty easy to see that if the king does move here, then the bishop takes, and you're immediately going to capture the queen. So that being said, I know that that's already winning for me. I'm okay with that kind of move. Moving back is another interesting idea with the king. But the general idea that I have here is now, when I looked at this position, I saw that that queen to b4 was probably the best before I took. And I had very similar ideas. I actually wanted to either move up with the queen or move back with the queen, with the idea of coming along these diagonals and coming to the back row, where I would be pretty good with getting mate. It's a pretty devastating attack. So not really an option to go back. You're not really doing too much. especially if you're going to go to like a light square, because then you have the bishop check. Once the king takes, then you can pick up the rook, which is interesting in itself. So, so the only other move that we have to really look at is this move, which is just king over. And again, I have threats like this where I'm just kind of coming in, but I wanted to see if I could calculate just a little bit further with keeping the rook on here. There's a lot of good cool tactics that are in it. So I thought about the rook push and to move forward. And keep in mind that I'm going to be doing this from this position. I'm going to be doing this all on the board, and you're going to try to do it in your mind. I'm going to use arrows to try to help you out, but the general idea is that you should be doing this with the calculations in your head and trying to get as far as you possibly can and looking at all the different options. So we've already covered this move. This move doesn't really help at all either. It's the basic idea is that the king not doing anything in these positions makes it basically a free move. And again, these moves, these ideas are all going to come with big threats. So from here, the only move I really wanted to calculate was king to c7. And then rook up. And what's interesting about that is that we run into this position again where if the king takes the bishop, then you come down and you check and you pick up the queen. So you can't really take the bishop and you can't move to this square. So again, your options are to fall back to this square right here where, again, you're met with these threats. Or you can move up, which is another interesting thought. You can move up in this case because, again, your king is on this square. I've just now checked with the rook, so my rook is on this square instead, and now the king goes here. So keeping that in your head, so my rook's here, the king's here. In that case, he's threatening to take my rook, and I calculated this move, which is interesting. What's really cool about this is that I'm threatening the queen. Oh, you know what? I think I might have the board set up wrong. I think it was. Hold on, let me go ahead and edit this. I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick. Okay. There we go. We're going to do that. Oh, let's flip the board though. Okay. So in this position, no, it wasn't this position. It must have been a different position. Hold on. Oh no, it was. I'm sorry. My apologies. My apologies. So this is the position that's on the board. Yeah. I'm getting confused already. It's late. My apologies. All right. So yeah, we're in this position. So again, king moves over. I move up with the rook check. The king moves to d6, and then I move here with check. And this is a check because I'm basically forking. But what's interesting about it is that with the rook here and the king here with this check, queen takes is not an option. And the reason that queen check is not an option, or queen takes is not an option, is because this pawn is moved out of the way, and this queen sees this square. And if you can visualize it in your head, the king is on this square, my rook is here, and my queen is here. And that's checkmate. So he's forced to, he can't take my pawn with the queen. Okay, well, what about the king? The king can do this, but then you have a lot of, the immediate threat, I think, in this position is just to push pawns, because the king is moving up the board pretty viciously. I think that maybe something like this is good, with the idea that I'm just going to push the king further up, and then you have this check, and yeah, you're driving the king away. But I thought that this idea with the pawn here is really interesting. So we're going to take a look at it with the engine here in a minute. And then obviously that the rook can't take the pawn because you still have this same mate idea. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at it real quick with the engine just to see what it says. Go ahead and close this. So yeah, so right, the computer's already saying you should probably just take the bishop. But I do want to go ahead and look at it this way. Okay, yep. And then moving back is for the best. Yeah. Still, there's a 13 plus advantage, so I'm not really too worried about that. And then this, yep, that's a nice move. With the idea that so I want to just see what happens if you take, yeah, just a pawn push. Yeah, again, yeah, just pushing the king up the board. Oh, this is a terrible. That's just mate, yeah. Just making. So in this position, the king has run all the way from here, all the way over, down, just to get mated, and that's a brutal mate. But from the original position here, I did calculate to this little mating idea all the way to the king coming to the square. So if you count half moves as moves, because my bishop was originally here, we're not going to count half moves. We're going to count full moves. So this move is a full move. 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 moves in advance. And even if you just looked at the, I wish I had found this this other crazy mate. This would have been great to view over the board. But yeah. So I saw 4 moves there, and then yeah, obviously this mate. This is a pretty mate. But being able to see, 4 or 5 moves ahead. So if I had calculated this line instead, this is 4, 5, yeah, 5.5 moves. That would have been very nice. And this is the kind of calculation that, you're hanging mate on every move, so you have to be pretty precise with it. But it's really a good way to kind of test your visualization in the moments. So, and with that being said, we're going to go ahead and do a couple of puzzles, and I'm going to kind of walk through what my thoughts are on the puzzles and how I would go about solving them, and trying to help you guys out as far as getting you better with your puzzles, and getting your rating up as well. All right, so here we have best move for white. I see that my knight is pinned by this bishop. These are opposing bishops. This one's protected by the knight. This one's protected by the queen. Obviously, bishop takes, knight takes on d2, then the queen hangs. So you would have to take back with the king or the queen. That's probably the idea of this. The other thing that I like to do when I look at these puzzles is I always like to go back one move, just to see. In this position, you get to see what was moved and why, or what pieces were taken. Those are typically some hints that you'll get. So in this position, the bishop moved out to b4. Nothing was taken, so it's not really a question of, should I take back? In this case, the question is, should I be taking the bishop, and what are the arguments against it? Do I have any other tactics in the position? As far as pieces are concerned, it looks like everything is even. Yeah, we're even Stevens on the board. They've got 2 bishops and a knight. I've got 2 knights and a bishop. Both rooks are still on. Queen still on. And both of us still have 7 pawns. So everything's even here. I'm not down material, so I'm not having to look for a mate. I'm just going to be looking generally at the position. So in this case, the bishop is opposed. If he takes, then obviously I have to take back with the queen. The only other thing that I would have to say is that there's a pin on this bishop. So if the bishop can't move, for instance, to take this knight. Knowing that, I see now that my knight is kind of hanging by that metric, because if it was black to move here, then queen takes knight on g5. If knight takes, then bishop takes on d1, and that's a little bit of a fair trade. The only thing that's probably hindrance to white is that my castling rights have been taken away. So I'll have to keep that in mind. So this knight is not technically threatened, but it's not in a good in a good position. I got to make sure that I don't just hang my knight or put it in a bad position going forward. So when you come across any kind of puzzle like this, the first thing you should look for is checks and captures. In this position, I don't see any checks. So we're going to look at captures first. So the first one that I see is bishop takes over here, and then knight takes. Knight takes on b4, and it looks pretty standard. I'm thinking about ways that I can attack the knight. So moves such as a3 or c3. C3 would be kind of weird because d takes c on c3, and then this pawn is kind of weak. So looking at a3 with the knight here, a3, the knight just moves back. I don't see anything immediate that's kind of sends up flares. I do notice that this pawn would be hanging, or I say hanging, but it would be loose if the knight were to move away. However, this bishop is pinning that knight specifically, so I would have to unpin the knight first, either by moving the queen away or by playing something like g4 in order to unpin the bishop, or to unpin the knight from the bishop. Let me look to see if I can find anything else. So besides that, there's a pin here. This knight has to be protected a little bit. So let's go ahead and think about moves that are forcing. So in this position, this is a pretty forcing move, just because it's going to be taking my queen. That's a capture. This is a little bit of a forcing move as well, with the idea that the bishop would have to move back from where it's at. I'm looking at threats to like the queen, and the king is oddly placed in this corner here. It's just in a rough spot. So yeah, I'm just thinking about like if I could pick my queen up and move it anywhere on the board, like here would be okay with a check, but then obviously he has this king move over. So I'm thinking that it's not part of that. So give me just a moment to sit here and kind of calculate it a little bit. Some interesting motifs here with the piece placement. This bishop's coming down, and it's I guess it kind of goes back to the original question of, do I want to take this bishop, and if I do, what are the threats behind it? So I noticed here that if I play a move like c3, I'm allowing my queen to come here to b3, and I notice that that's a check, right? And so obviously something like a block on the on the check leads to mate, with my queen being here. So that's not an option. So the king has to move over, and I immediately recognize that if the king moves over in this position, there's a nice little knight fork here that picks up the queen. So that's a kind of a little motif that's in the position that forcing the king into a position where it would be forked, which is really interesting. And now I'm just going to try to see if I can find a way to combine that with my original idea. So originally I thought about this, but then instead of taking immediately, the bishop can come here and force... Well, I guess I don't have to take with the knight. Yeah, I do have to take with the knight. So let's just look at that real quick. So bishop takes. I can't take with the queen because my knight is hanging. The bishop's no longer here to defend. It's on b4. So the queen is eyeing down my knight. So I can't take with the queen or with this pawn. I actually have to come back with the knight. So on this move, takes, and then that fork with the knight is no longer there. So now I'm kind of thinking about ways to kind of combine these two motifs, these two thoughts, as to how I would do this. So you could go knight right away. That was an interesting thought. But then the queen would move. Where's the queen going to go? Queen can't go here or here. So let's just imagine our knight here. Queen can't go here or here or here or here. So queen has to go here. And then queen's protecting the bishop. Queen. Yeah, okay. Queen can't go here because then we have this fork between these two pieces. So that's kind of ruled out. So now can't move there. Here, and here. That's a lot of different options for the queen. So maybe I'm thinking that it's not the queen. Maybe I need to block this bishop first. So let's think about that. So maybe bishop here first, and then if I block the bishop, then what happens on bishop takes? I'm going to guess probably queen takes then. Yeah, it's a really interesting puzzle on this one. This is a higher level puzzle, but I feel like these are the tougher puzzles that you really want to spend your time on because the motifs are really important for you to learn. Takes. Yeah, this check here looks really nice if I can get my queen over there. So it makes me wonder if this is the first move, with the idea that I'm fine with you taking here. And then your bishop goes back, I'm guessing. Probably. You don't want to you don't have an opportunity to trade first because the queen comes. Well, I guess you do have that opportunity. I could say the queen comes here, but let's go ahead and remove these. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. Now I'm kind of thinking about like more unusual moves to see if there's anything in the position that I can see that's more pressing. Maybe like a double attack. So let's go here, queen up. that really threaten anything? Takes, takes. And then maybe this. Bishop goes back. Yeah, it's really interesting. So this is taking a little bit of time, but I think that I just have to kind of make a move and think about it kind of after the fact. I'm not really threatening anything if I take this, right? If I take this, then he takes here. Then I just don't have anything in that position. There's no checks in that position either. If I do this, moves back, now takes, then takes with check, and I have to take with the queen. Yeah, just not good. I for some reason I feel like this is the first move, with the idea that I want to try to get this position where the queen is out. So we're gonna go with this first move, and we're just gonna have to go with it to see if it's the move. So that is the move. That's interesting. So obviously the threat was too large to deal with, which makes sense. And now with this move, with the queen coming down, it's obviously just left the door open for this bishop to grab up this bishop. So I think it's just best to go with the bishop. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Let's go ahead and take a look at the reason why that's such a big threat in the position. So I thought on this position, okay, well, what if they just go back? I have this moves over. Oh, yeah. So this is that same general idea. Yeah, it's just this general threat that I'm always coming here first. I don't know why that's so much better than this. So leaving it here and just going something like this. I guess I'm losing more pieces this way, but yeah, it's an interesting. So for some reason I thought that I saw this motif and I just didn't go for it. I just didn't think that there was a reason to go for it. So yeah, going back, yeah, it is just that motif. I just missed the conclusion to it. It's interesting. You kind of go blind and without thinking about it. That you're not really you're threatening this motif, and there's just no way to stop it really besides coming down. So, I mean, we got it right. I wish that I had not taken so much time on it. So this is another interesting one where we went back a move to see what move had been made, and in this case we're dropping a rook. So the question is, in this position, do we have anything for the rook as a sacrifice, basically? So a quick count of the pieces. I'm just down a full rook at the moment. The question is there any kind of compensation for it? So obviously the first thing that we can look at is the idea that, okay, what happens if the bishop takes, or if the queen takes back? What kind of threats do we have in the position? Well, we get half a piece back, basically, because the bishop is worth half of what the rook is, and we're still threatening to take this bishop with a fork, because this bishop is on pari, basically. And I'm immediately seeing tactics where if the queen's here and the knight is here, then the queen coming to this square is just checkmate. So that's a good motif to recognize. I also see that if I move my knight, then my rook falls. So let's just think about this kind of more tactically, just from a regular position. So let's say knight takes the bishop here. We're threatening the queen. We're threatening the rook, but the rook has this move where it can come down and take. So we're going to go ahead and take back with the bishop, We can take it back with the bishop, or we can take it back with the queen. That's just for the sake of keeping it simpler. We're going to just go knight takes first, then rook takes, bishop takes. The queen is still under threat, so the queen would probably move up to this to d7, and then we have the option of taking the bishop, but then we hang our knight. So at the end of that line, though, it looks like we might have bishop to h6, which again threatens this this mate. But then I think that the queen just comes back to f7, and it protects against that mate because we don't have the rook on f1. We actually have the bishop on f1. So keeping that all in mind, I don't think that the bishop is going to be that specific combination of moves is going to be critical for us. So let's go ahead and think about the knight taking, and then after rook takes, queen takes. We're still threatening the queen. The queen doesn't have this move because of the knight that's there, but the queen can come over here. Now it's stopping this threat of coming down to f7 and then giving mate on g7. But in order to do that, so let's think about it this way. So we're going to be taking a bishop, rook takes, queen over, and now queen takes bishop. I guess in this position they don't have to move the queen, so we can do takes, queen takes, and then they just move the bishop back. Oh no, they do have to move the queen because the queen is under threat from the knight. So let's take a look at that again. So knight takes bishop on e6, and it's threatening both the rook and the queen. They take my rook with a check. I take with the queen. Then the queen has to move, probably to threaten the knight, and then taking the bishop, they take the knight, and we've kind of transposed to not transposed, but in a weird way we're back into this position where I now threaten this, and the queen moves back to protect against the mate on g7. So now what happens? Okay, so let's see if there's anything else in that position. So knight takes. It just doesn't make sense to move. You can't really save either piece without capturing. So the rook seems forced. It doesn't really matter which piece takes here. That the end result is the same as that. After the queen moves up or moves out of the danger from the knight, this queen is still going to capture the bishop, and then after the queen captures here, it's pretty secure. The knight and the queen kind of hold the position closed. So I think that we've exhausted the knight a little bit. This is the first move. So let's go ahead and take a look at queen takes bishop, which is another capture in the position. Always looks for checks and captures. So now queen takes here. Now the bishop is still in a position where it's going to be captured. So it's got limited options. Can't move here, can't move here, can't move here because of the pawn. It can move back, and it can move here. So these are the optional squares for it, in order to both get out of there and then still protect against the knight coming to this square. Okay, so let's just think about our queen here, and then let's just put a random bishop move on the board. Let's say that it's back to d7. It's interesting because this move, knight is still available. Now there's a couple of different options that black has. Black can obviously take this knight. It can also trade rooks first. They can also trade rooks first. So let's look at knight takes, bishop takes. So queen takes, knight. Let's start over. Queen takes bishop on a1. Queen back to d7. knight to e6, threatening both the queen and the rook. And let's say bishop takes the knight. Okay, the question is, what do we have here? We do have this, now that the knight's out of the way, we do have this threat of bringing the queen over. And the interesting thing about it is that there's not really a good way to block this mate threat. So queen takes, bishop back, knight moves forward, bishop takes, bishop here, you're threatening this mate. This is really the only move that saves mate. You have this move that the knight can move here, but then obviously it gets captured. So this is the only good move, it looks like, in the position. And then we have this move where we take the rook. If king takes, then we move the queen in, and it's not mate, but it's very close. It's very interesting. So let's do a quick count. So we're down a rook. If we take the bishop, then we're down a half a piece, basically. Or we're going to say a piece, because 2 pieces make the rook. So we're down a piece. Moving back, knight here, bishop takes. Now we're down 2 pieces, or a rook here to threaten mate here. Takes, and we're still down a full rook. So we would have to find compensation in this position. So I don't see it, at least not immediately. So let's take another look at maybe a similar move. Maybe a different move order. So queen takes. And let's say the bishop moves back. And now I still like the idea of moving the knight. This is the most threatening move, but then it's easily taken away. Let's look at another move. So let's say queen takes bishop, bishop back, knight here, bishop takes. Now instead of waiting, let's go ahead and take the rook now. And yeah, that's interesting in itself as well. It looks like the queen can just slide over, and now it's gotten rid of this threat here of putting the bishop here, because the queen can just take it, and you're still protecting everything from here with the king. So again, it's kind of tricky. So maybe that's not the move as well. So I still like the idea of going for this queen takes bishop, and then we are eyeing all these squares. So maybe there's a better way to make use of that. Let me see if I can find anything else. So this is an interesting move. So let's say queen takes, bishop back, knight takes. I'm threatening the rook, and I'm threatening the knight. Well, the knight can just take then. So maybe that's not the move. Maybe here. Okay, so bishop back, knight here. Am I threatening anything in this position? So let's say we're gonna go ahead and clear it off again. Queen takes, bishop back, knight here. I'm threatening just mate here. So maybe takes, but then, yeah, I'm still not finding anything that's more concrete than that. It's really interesting. Yeah, let me take another minute out here to see if I can find anything else. It's interesting to try to combine motifs, like combine ideas. Hmm. Yeah, I kind of like the idea of going back to this bishop take capture from the knight now. Now that I've got these kind of ideas about this bishop coming over. So it takes here. This is the only way to save both pieces. I want to say maybe with the bishop taking back, right? And then this bishop moves back. Let's say to this square, as it's probably the most. Nope, the bishop can't move back. Again, I've run into this problem again where the bishop can't move back just yet because this queen is under attack from the knight. So it's forced to move up or move over. Now I can kind of, now my options are, do I have to take this bishop? I don't have to take the bishop. I could do something like queen here. Yeah, it's an interesting position with the knight here, queen here, queen here. My knight is pinned, but at the same time, it's kind of stopping a lot of weird things from happening. Just maybe just knight takes first. Then you have this takes, then captures. Yeah, it's really interesting combo. Let me think about it just a little bit longer. Let me see if I can find anything else. Knight takes, bishop on e6, rook takes on f1. I didn't see anything immediately with queen takes. I'm not really threatening anything out of the ordinary immediately. Takes. Queen threatens there. Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Again, I feel like I'm complicating things. I'm overthinking it. If I take the bishop, rook takes, and maybe it's just an even trade of pieces. I'm down a rook. If I take this back, I'm down a piece. Rook takes, bishop takes. I'm still down a piece. Queen up, queen takes. I'm even, but then queen takes here. Yeah, I feel like there's something that I'm missing, and um, maybe trying to go through the puzzle is going to be the best solution for this. Again, I'm not seeing the complete continuation, and I wish that I could find the complete continuation before I move forward. But something about this move makes me think that it's correct. I don't think that taking the bishop first is correct. I could be wrong. I'm going to try this bishop first. Yeah. All right, now let's try to calculate from here, because we got the first continuation, or we got the first line. So now the question is takes, or takes. We can't move away with the king because our queen is hanging. I like the idea of keeping the queen here to eye the bishop up, because if possible, then this is my general ideas that I want to be able to put myself in a better position. Oh, so now I'm starting to think about ways that I can win this bishop for free I say for free, but I win the bishop without having to hang my knight here. So takes. Let's just go ahead and clear the board real quick. So if a pawn takes here, then let's say the queen moves up because it's under threat. It's going to take my knight. I originally thought queen takes and then knight takes, but now I'm starting to see that maybe I can move the knight and still threaten something in the position. So in this position, takes, queen up, moving the knight here doesn't benefit me. Or maybe it does. Actually, moving the knight out of the way actually allows this. Nope, this check is still not there because this knight covers the square. So let's go ahead and think about that again. So takes, queen up. Now I want to avoid the queen taking my knight. Let's think about squares that I can go to. So I can go here. Am I threatening anything immediately? I don't think so. I can go here, which is interesting because I'm actually threatening the queen again. I guess at that point the only way that the queen can continue is if it moves here, but it's not really threatening to take the knight. The knight's already kind of hanging by the pawn. Oh, but it's not. So that's a really interesting motif here as well, is that if queen up, knight here, it's not really threatening to take because the queen is hanging, but then how do I take this bishop? If I move the queen off of this file, then the knight does hang. So let me go back a little bit. So we're thinking about this move, this move, this move. And now without threatening the queen, let's see, does the queen have any spaces it can go without being threatened? It can move back, right? It can move back. And then at this point, is it even? Yeah, it's even. So takes, yeah, if I take this, I'm just up a piece. Yeah, I'm just up a piece. Where did I go wrong here? I went from down a full rook to now, if I take this rook, I'm up a piece. That's weird. That's really strange. And then upon this, I take this. He takes here, and I've got two bishops and a queen. Oh, but it's not a piece. I'm still down a half piece. Okay, so maybe that's not the right continuation. Okay, so let's try to save our knight again. Okay, so queen up, knight here. Let's say the queen moves back. Yeah, I'm just not seeing a good continuation for that, about being able to save the knight from this. So let's look at queen takes. I don't know if I saw anything with queen takes. With queen takes, it's just a matter of saving the bishop. So let's say all the way back. I'm not really threatening to infiltrate anymore. Wait. Again, if I take here, he has to move up. Yeah, and then it's a question of can I save the knight? So takes. This is another question that comes up a lot in puzzles like this is especially when there's a rook here, there's a piece kind of on pre or hanging. And moving away is not an option. The question is, which piece should you take with and why? So there's usually the best piece to take with, and there's a reason why you should be taking with it. So if I take with the bishop, I really don't see a continuation because my bishop doesn't really get free. I also don't like the idea of putting the king on this open file, so I'm starting to lean towards queen takes. But now that I'm trying to look at the continuation, so queen takes on f1. This bishop is still on pre, so the queen has to move up and threaten the knight. Oh, am I threatening? I might be threatening this move then. Knight g5 with the idea of coming down with the queen. And what's interesting about that is that the queen can't move here because the knight does threaten that square. And then if my queen is on f7 with check and my knight's here, then I'm also threatening this mate with the queen. So I think we just solved it. I think we just found out that I'm going to need to take this with the queen, with the idea that if the queen moves up to d7 to threaten the knight, we're actually going to move the knight back, and we're going to threaten this check right here. But now, yeah, and then the only way to really stop that is to bring the rook over. And keep in mind that our knight is not on e6 anymore. It is on g5, so I don't have this capture here with the queen. But that being said, I still have this bishop that's on pre over here, so I can pick it up, and then I will be up an exchange, or I won't be at an exchange. It'll be an even trade kind of situation. So I'm thinking that this is the move. Yep, and then if I'm correct, I believe that this is the only move. And that's interesting that the knight moved instead, because I was thinking about this move instead of the knight move. So does this not threaten it? I thought with this move, yeah, that's an interesting kind of development. Is that I thought this would be the saving grace for the position, with the idea that that would be the way to stop. I mean, you really want your rook over here to help as much as possible. So let's see what the computer did. So computer comes forward with the knight. I don't see any way of saving the bishop. I do see that the knight is kind of infiltrating here. I don't see any immediate threats, but I do see that this bishop in the corner is still on pre. So I'm going to go ahead and see about taking that bishop, and that was the solution. Yeah, I'm interested just out of curiosity to see if this is okay. So yeah, so rook to f8 is a move. It's thinking about it. I think that rook f8. It's interesting that it thought about it for a little bit, and now it says rook f8 is best. Yeah, I thought rook f8 was for sure the way that the computer was going to play it, and instead it went knight c6. And it says that this is about the same, maybe slightly better for black, which is interesting. Yeah. So this is what I would have played in game, which a computer says is best. But yeah, so you see this, and then obviously the bishop is on pre. That's nice. That's a good one. So we gained, I guess, 10 rating points from that. We're going to continue. Everything that I like about puzzles, I'll just go ahead and throw the thumbs up there. So let's see. In this position, queen to f5. Okay, with the idea that we're bearing down now on my bishop here. As far as piecewise goes, looks like I'm down a pawn. Yeah, I'm down a pawn. So there is going to be some kind of tactic here. And the bishop is defended twice by the rook and by the queen. It's attacked twice by my bishop and my rook. And I'm already kind of seeing really weird motifs, really weird patterns where things like this,
where the queen comes over and checks. You always want to look at checks and captures first. So this is the very first thing that I look at, is the queen coming over. I also see this check, which I'm not sure if that accomplishes anything. I see that this queen is on this diagonal with my bishop, and that behind it is this pawn over here. So, you know, that might be a threat in the later on in the position, with the idea that if the king were to move up, for instance, then the bishop here would win the rook. Again, these are just like little patterns, little things that I spot in the position. I see that the queen's pretty well defended where it's at right now. So let's just so I've looked at checks. Let's look at captures. So this knight can be captured by my bishop. Doesn't look like it. The knight is kind of looking at some of these important squares, so that might be part of the solution. Just have to keep that in mind. This is the only other capture that I see besides rook takes. And our knight is not doing too hot on this side of the board. As far as escape squares, this bishop can go to over here. Although it wouldn't want to, obviously, because it's being pinned by the queen. Yeah, it's interesting. So let's just look at one of the captures. So in this case, check or captures the knight on b6. This captures here, and then these rooks are connected as well. But they're both defended. The other thing that I'm noticing is that this square, which I noticed earlier was for the check, I'm starting to develop an idea here now. Because this square is defended by two pieces, the bishop and the knight. So I'm thinking about ways to distract it. So the first thing that comes to mind is just taking this knight. So if I take the knight, I'm undefending this square. And then they have bishop takes. And then rook takes. And then this knight can take the bishop, or the rook. So I don't think that's the order. I do spot something different here, though. An interesting move order is that if I take this bishop, you really don't want to take it back with the queen, because it's defended by the rook. So you would have to play this move where you come down and take the my bishop. From there, I could take this knight, and I'm threatening to come here with the queen, because that would be a check, and the rook is only defended once by the queen. So let's just take a look at that real quick. So here, this is forced. There's no other move, right? Yeah, so that makes sense. So we're imagining now I take and then rook takes. So his rook is here. Let's just go ahead and clear the board real quick. And I'm just going to imagine that his rook is on d3 and see what kind of things pop up at me. So I can take with my rook, and then queen takes. But I don't see anything immediately that kind of yells, that kind of screams out at me. So I don't think it's taking with the rook. If I take the knight on b, okay, so let's look at this line. So bishop takes, rook takes, bishop takes here, rook takes, rook takes, pawn takes. Am I threatening anything in this position? I don't think I am. That's an interesting idea. My apologies. I'm starting to wonder if there's a way to deflect this this queen. So this is forced, and I like this line. Alexa, stop. All right, so this is gonna be the last puzzle for the night. I like this this threat here of taking. Takes. And then I want to threaten the check to pick up the rook. So I would go here. The problem is that he has this little in-between move where he takes my rook and I take back. And I don't think I'm threatening anything in that position. So maybe we change up the order. Okay. Now I'm starting to see some different lines. So now, what about rook takes first? What's interesting about rook takes is that after rook takes, the rook is pinned to the queen. And it's our move. So now bishop takes, and he doesn't have rook takes on d1 anymore because our rook is gone. So he can't really move this rook out of the way. After rook takes, bishop takes, that's just an even trade. And then he takes back here, and then we can do something along the lines of coming here, checking, moving the king over, and picking up this rook. So now I'm starting to think that's the solution, and I think I'm pretty confident with that. So I'm going to try it. That is for the best. All right. Now, I just want to look this over one more time to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I think that taking this is probably for the best. We're down in exchange. With this move, we're even. Yeah. And so the board continuation on this is to take the bishop. So now we're down in exchange again. Here, after the king moves, we're actually winning an exchange. Or we're not winning an exchange, we're just winning the full rook back. So we went from down in exchange to basically up a piece. Because if you look at the board afterwards, the bishop and the knight are still on the board, and they only have one knight. So a really good combination there. And I like these combinations where it forces you to think about the different move orders, and that's something that a lot of players get kind of misunderstood. It's a really common misunderstanding, or a really common occurrence for players to miss out on combinations where it's just a flip of the move order that really makes the difference. Seeing first off that this trade, although it looks at first, it really looks like it's bad, all else being the same, it puts our opponent in a position where they really don't have a way out of getting out of this pin. By offering the exchange, so we've now exchanged so that they're up basically a piece, or the piece for the exchange. We put them in a bad position where this knight or this rook is not where it wants to be, and it doesn't have an easy trade to get out of this pin. And if you miss a tempo here for any reason, I'm sure that there's a way that black gets out of this. So, for instance, even what would be a forcing move, and then it blocks our queen. So even if you were to do something like a waiting move, like this move, it immediately drops down to 0-0. It's completely a flat game now, which is, that's. I wonder if there's a second best. Yeah, so the second best move is the one that I selected, which is interesting. I was just looking for a waiting move here. Anything that's passive, anything else besides this move, and this is the only move really in the position in order to maintain the advantage. And the idea is that we've taken we've taken that opportunity to continue down the line, the forcing line, and get into the position where we're using that pin immediately, quickly. And yeah, it's a really good puzzle. I really like this one, specifically because of the most common move by far. I'm sure when you're looking at this, the first thing that everybody looks at is bishop takes, because it's natural. You have a bishop there. You know that you're going to be losing a piece. Why not take with the bishop? And it's just not as good because you're not exploiting the fact that there's a pin there, obviously, but also you have to think about the play that you're going to get from the piece exchange itself. There's a lot of opportunities in games where you can trade the rook that's on f1 for the knight that's on f6. And it happens in a lot of higher end games. It happens in a lot of tactical positions, because there are times where bettering your position is going to be the way to go, even if you have to sacrifice material. And this is a really good learning opportunity to think to yourself that you shouldn't always think about taking piece for piece. It's not always an eye for an eye. In this case, the only move really that holds any kind of position, you can see that up here, the only move that holds any kind of advantage for white is to take with the rook first and put them in this bad position where they have no other pieces defending the rook. You move the queen over for an easy fork between the check and the rook, and then you just pick it up. And I would say probably even with the queen, picking up with the queen, which is pretty forcing, still leaves white in a beautiful position as far as an advantage is concerned. So, we're going to go ahead and give a thumbs up for that one. We are officially over 2,300. So I'm sure I'll update it for the next time. But thank you very much for watching. If you have, I'll look back through the comments here. I don't have two monitors, so I didn't look at the comments. But if you guys have any comments, I would love to read them afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream there, and thank you very much for watching.